Talk to us about the last couple of days of these ultimatums about whether or not, from various different leaders, whether or not all the hostages are released on Saturday and the significance of it all.
Yeah, there's a lot here, isn't there? Let's start with President Trump, his ultimatum. All hell will be let loose if all the hostages aren't released by midday on Saturday. It is worth remembering he said a similar thing. He said if they're not all released by the time I'm inaugurated on the 20th of January, that passed with nothing. And he also, despite the headlines, he also said ultimately it's up to Israel to decide. I'm simply giving you an American perspective. I think what's actually happening on the ground at the moment is worth looking at tactically. Hamas has complained that Israel is not following the agreement. They said that Israelis should have been pulling out of the Netzarim corridor. That's the corridor that bisects North and South Gaza to allow the flow of refugees back into northern Gaza. They said that was not happening and therefore they were going to stop the hostages being released. Israel said they were so upset with the release of certain batches of hostages. You remember the early batch where there was absolute chaos going on, and they've said they delayed their withdrawal. Both sides therefore are blaming each other. What is happening here is that neither side is committed to this ceasefire. I mean, bluntly, it suits both sides for phase one of the ceasefire because it's about hostages. Netanyahu has been criticised for not doing enough to get the hostages out. Therefore, by getting some out, it appeases his critics. Hamas, they've been retreating into smaller and smaller areas of Gaza, and therefore managing 100 hostages must be a bit of a nightmare. They don't need 100, they probably need a handful, and therefore it suits both sides. Whether or not phase two of the ceasefire, which is starting to be negotiated about a week ago, has any chance of success is another matter altogether.
I mean, what's at stake, though, in the days ahead? Is it now expected from the military community that if hostages aren't released on Saturday, that it's a snapshot back to where we were a few months ago, or is it a slow and steady step back to potential more conflict?
I think all of this is in Prime Minister Netanyahu's hands, bluntly, and he's been pretty stoical. I know politically he's under a lot of pressure from these hardliners to go in and deal with Hamas firmly. You'll be aware that these whole hostage releases have been a lot of theatre and pantomime. The Hamas fighters have been walking around in uniform. They don't normally walk around in uniform at all. They've been doing that. They've been showcasing their arms. It's absolute defiance, and that will have been rubbing a lot of Prime Minister Netanyahu's cabinet the wrong way. So I suspect they'll be wanting to go in hard and heavy, any opportunity. And, of course, it feels like President Trump is also trying to endorse that sort of behaviour. I'm not quite sure that's true, though.
Let's pivot back to what we were discussing last hour. The US Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth is in Belgium, meeting with NATO leaders. In fact, we just got pictures of him coming in here that you can see meeting with the UK Defence Secretary, John Healey. Very warm, friendly in terms of the snapshot, as you'd expect. How do you think these two men are going to get on?
I think they're going to get on quite well because Hegseth, at the moment, the UK is in quite a privileged position because, first of all, it does pay its 2% in terms of NATO contributions. Also, it has a very warm relationship historically with the US, and also basically bear in mind this trade tariffs argument. The UK broadly has a zero balance of payments deficit. So in other words, the UK is not the target of Americans' ire. I think also America will see the UK as a key role to play in trying to galvanise a European response to Russia and allow the US to start pivoting and focusing on China. So for all sorts of reasons, I wouldn't be at all surprised if Hegseth is looking to have a much more positive relationship with our Defence Secretary. But again, be fascinating to be a fly on the wall for those discussions.